A CEO goes undercover, thinking he's ready to face the challenges of his own company. But when everything falls apart on a crucial delivery, it's not him who saves the day. It's the one man the company has overlooked for years. What happens when leadership realizes they've been blind all along? Lewis Hendricks stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the stiff collar of the navy blue button-down shirt. Over it, he strapped on the reflective safety vest, bright, bulky, and nothing like the tailored suits he was used to. He stared at his reflection, the fluorescent light catching the tension in his jaw. No cap to hide under this time, just him, exposed and out of place. "Ready for your first day, rookie?" A voice called from the doorway. It was Dan, the operations manager, who had no idea he was speaking to the CEO. Lewis forced a grin. "As ready as I'll ever be." Dan handed him a clipboard with today's route. "You've got a rough one. Hope you're not afraid of a little overtime." He smirked and walked away. Lewis exhaled, gripping the clipboard tightly. He had built Titan Logistics into one of the country's largest freight companies, but lately, profits were slipping. Customer complaints were rising. From his office on the top floor, the answers never seemed clear. That's why he was here, boots on the ground, undercover, to see what the hell was going wrong. The depot buzzed around him. Forklifts zipping between pallets, drivers cursing at jammed printers, dispatchers shouting into radios. The air smelled like diesel and cheap coffee. Lewis climbed into truck 214, a dented rig with peeling paint and a faded company logo. As he adjusted the mirrors, someone knocked on the passenger door. An older man stood there, arms crossed, his weathered face shaded by a battered trucker cap. His eyes were sharp, assessing. "You're the new guy?" the man asked. Lewis nodded. "Yeah, Lewis." The man climbed up, settling into the seat like he'd lived there for years. "Ray Donovan." He extended a hand, calloused, strong. Lewis shook it, feeling the grip of someone who'd hauled more than just cargo in his life. Ray scanned the clipboard. "They're sending you up I-45 this morning? That route's a mess. Potholes, construction, angry customers waiting on late shipments." He whistled low. "Welcome to Titan. I guess they're throwing me into the fire," Lewis said with a nervous chuckle. Ray's gaze lingered on him. "That's how we all started." He leaned back. "Let's see if you sink or swim." The engine rumbled to life, and they pulled out of the depot. The morning sun glinted off the side mirrors as they merged onto the highway. For a moment, Lewis felt a flicker of excitement. This was it, the real work, the pulse of his company. But it wasn't long before that pulse turned erratic. They arrived right on schedule for the first stop, but the loading dock manager wasn't having it. "Your software says noon," the manager snapped. "You're early. I'm not ready for this load." Even though their paperwork showed the correct time, they were forced to wait. Ray just smiled, patient. "We'll wait." He turned to Lewis. "That's what happens when the software updates don't talk to the field. Been saying it for years." Back in the cab, Lewis scribbled notes. "We don't have manual overrides for delivery windows?" Ray laughed dryly. "You'd think. But those decisions are made by folks who've never been in the driver's seat." As they drove on, Lewis noticed more cracks. A warning light flickered on the dashboard. Ray tapped it, unconcerned. "That thing's been blinking for months. We've put in tickets. No one fixes it." At a gas station stop, Lewis watched as a fellow driver, Rachel, argued with dispatch over a faulty route that had sent her 30 miles off track. "That's half my fuel wasted," she shouted into the phone. Ray shook his head. "They'll dock her pay for being late. Won't care it wasn't her fault." Lewis's stomach tightened. Every interaction peeled back a new layer of frustration, inefficiency, exhaustion. These weren't lazy workers, they were running on fumes, constantly putting out fires created by higher-ups. By noon, the sky had turned overcast, matching the weight Lewis felt pressing down on him. His hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. His back screamed from the stiff seat. They pulled into a warehouse lot for their next drop. As Lewis climbed down, a forklift nearly clipped his leg, missing him by inches. "Watch it!" the operator yelled. Ray grabbed Lewis's arm, pulling him out of the way. "You gotta watch your six out here," he warned. "No one's looking out for you." Lewis's breath came fast. "How do you all keep up with this every day?" Ray glanced at him, something between pity and pride in his eyes. "We don't keep up. We survive it." Lewis wiped sweat from his brow, looking around the chaotic yard. Trucks backed up 3 deep. Forklifts weaving dangerously close to pedestrians. Pallets left unattended, half-wrapped. And through it all, Ray remained steady, directing loaders with hand signals, calling in updates on his old flip phone because the truck's radio had stopped working hours ago, fixing paperwork errors with a practiced flick of his pen. As the afternoon wore on, Lewis noticed something else. Other drivers deferred to Ray. Questions flowed to him. Younger drivers followed his lead. Even dispatchers seemed to listen when Ray spoke. Yet despite that quiet authority, Ray's name never appeared on the supervisor rosters Lewis had reviewed last week. Why? As they climbed back into the cab for the final leg, Lewis dared to ask, "Ray, you ever think about moving up? Supervising, maybe? Seems like everyone already looks to you." Ray's mouth twitched into a half-smile. "Promotions ain't for guys like me." He turned the key in the ignition. "They're for the college boys upstairs. I'm just a guy who knows the roads." Lewis stared out the window as they pulled away, a hollow pit opening in his chest. He wondered, how many more Rays were hiding in plain sight, keeping this company alive while the top floor never noticed? The sun dipped lower, casting shadows across the highway. Lewis adjusted the brim of his cap, a quiet resolve building inside him. Tomorrow, he thought, he'd pay even closer attention. But he had no idea how much closer things were about to hit. The day had barely passed noon when the first real sign of trouble hit. Lewis gripped the steering wheel as the truck groaned under him, sputtering like an old smoker. Then a loud pop, followed by a hiss. "Pull over. Now." Ray barked from the passenger seat, already unbuckling his belt. Lewis eased the rig onto the gravel shoulder. Steam hissed from under the hood. Ray jumped out before the truck had fully stopped, lifting the hood with a grunt. Lewis climbed down after him, heart racing. "What is it?" Ray wiped grease onto his jeans, peering into the smoky engine. "Looks like the radiator hose blew." He straightened, hands on hips. "She's not going anywhere without a tow." Lewis stared at the engine, frustration bubbling up. "We're stuck." Ray gave a half nod. "For now." Lewis pulled out the radio. "I'll call dispatch." Ray held up a hand. "They won't send a truck for hours. They're already behind on roadside calls. Let me make some calls." Before Lewis could protest, Ray was dialing a number on his battered flip phone. He stepped away, pacing beside the truck as he spoke in low tones. Lewis looked around. They were parked on a lonely stretch of highway, surrounded by flat fields under a harsh sun. No rest stop, no gas station, just heat shimmering off the asphalt. A chirp came from the radio clipped to his belt. "Dispatch." Lewis raised it to his mouth. "Copy, truck 214. You're showing off route. Status? We've broken down. Radiator hose failure," Lewis replied. "Static." Then a sigh. "We're stretched thin today. Might be 3-4 hours before roadside can get to you. Sit tight." He lowered the radio, jaw tight. "Unbelievable." Ray returned, flipping his phone shut. "Got Louie to send his nephew with a spare hose. Should be here in 45. You just called a mechanic yourself?" Lewis asked. Ray shrugged. "Dispatch is too busy juggling fires they should have prevented. Sometimes it's faster to lean on old friends." Lewis leaned against the grill, watching Ray make another call, this one to another driver. "Hey Rico, listen. We're down by mile marker 82. I need you to swing by Johnson's feedlot and grab their pallet since we're stuck. Yeah, it's not your route, but they'll comp you a meal for the trouble." "Good man." He hung up, turned to Lewis. "That's one less late delivery today." Lewis felt a strange mix of awe and guilt. "You just rerouted it off the top of your head?" Ray chuckled, a tired sound. "I've been driving these roads longer than the GPS has existed. When the systems fail, you fall back on memory." The radio buzzed again. "Dispatch." Ray? The voice crackled. We're getting customer complaints about Johnson's feedlot. Says no one's shown up yet. Ray grabbed Lewis's radio before he could answer. Tell them Rico's en route. He's covering it. A pause. Did you authorize that? Ray's lips thinned. I didn't wait for authorization. I fixed the problem. Silence. Then, copy that. Ray handed the radio back, shaking his head. That's what's wrong with this place. People care more about covering their asses than covering ground. Lewis stared at him. Ray wasn't just improvising, he was leading. Quietly, efficiently. Solving problems dispatch couldn't untangle. Just from the cab of a broken-down truck. Minutes ticked by. Lewis watched as Ray juggled more calls. Getting a nearby driver to cover another pickup. Convincing a warehouse to hold a dock open longer. Promising a customer a credit to keep them calm. Do you always do this? Lewis asked quietly. Ray glanced over. Do what? Patch everything together while headquarters? Lewis gestured vaguely toward the sky. Has no clue. Ray let out a humorless laugh. Son, if I waited for HQ to fix things, these deliveries wouldn't move an inch. Just then, a rusted pickup rumbled up beside them. A wiry kid hopped out, hoisting a replacement hose. Ray, got your part. Appreciate you, Jimmy. Ray tossed the kid a folded 20. Get yourself lunch. Within minutes, Ray had the hood propped, sleeves rolled, and was replacing the hose himself while Lewis held tools. Sweat beaded down Ray's neck. His hands moved like a surgeon's, steady, precise. As Ray tightened the last clamp, Lewis's radio chirped again. This time, the voice wasn't dispatch. It was a familiar tone from corporate HQ. Seriously, why's Ray Donovan still on these routes? A voice complained. Lewis froze, recognizing the operations VP, Magnus Benson. A second voice responded, another executive. Because no one else wants them. I don't get it, Magnus muttered. Why does he bother? He's old school. Half his methods don't follow protocol. I swear, guys like him are the reason we're lagging. He's a relic. Won't be long before automation makes guys like Ray unnecessary. Static. Lewis's throat tightened. His hand hovered over the radio switch, but he couldn't bring himself to reply. Ray wiped his hands on a rag, oblivious to the conversation Lewis had just overheard. She'll hold until we get back to the depot, Ray said, closing the hood. Let's roll. Lewis climbed back into the cab silently. As Ray started the engine, Lewis stared out the windshield, a deep unease settling in his chest. For the first time, he realized the people keeping this company afloat were the very ones leadership had already written off. And worse, he'd been one of them. As the truck rumbled back onto the highway, Lewis's grip on the clipboard tightened. He wasn't just undercover anymore. He was watching a system that had already decided who mattered and who didn't. And Ray Donovan, the man who just saved an entire route from collapse, wasn't on that list. The clock ticked past midnight, but for Ray Donovan, the road didn't end when the sun went down. It only got quieter, lonelier, and heavier. The dashboard of his rig glowed softly in the darkness, illuminating the deep lines etched into his weathered face. Lewis sat beside him, exhausted, trying to process everything he'd witnessed throughout the day. Another hour will make it, Ray muttered, eyes fixed on the winding road ahead. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly on the wheel. He hadn't stopped since he took control of the chaotic reroutes, hadn't paused for a meal, hadn't even complained. The radio crackled again. Dispatch sounded frantic. Ray, we've got another problem. Unit 14 missed a stop. Client's furious. Can you swing by on your way back? Lewis opened his mouth to protest. Ray, you're already... I got it, Ray interrupted, reaching for the mic. Patch me through to the client. I'll talk to him. Before Lewis could argue, Ray was already smoothing things over on the call, his tone calm, patient, and personal in a way that no script or corporate training could teach. By the time he hung up, the client was pacified, agreeing to stay open late to receive the shipment. Why'd you take that on? It wasn't your mistake, Lewis asked, incredulous. Ray shrugged. turning onto a dark side road. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. What matters is they trust us. We show up. Every time. The weight of those words sat heavy between them as they rolled toward the forgotten stop. Lewis watched as Ray maneuvered the truck into a tight loading bay, hopped out, and, despite his obvious fatigue, personally unloaded half the cargo himself. The client shook his hand, offering a sincere thanks. Not once did Ray mention that he wasn't the original driver on the route. Back in the cab, Ray sank into his seat with a sigh. "That's the last one," he said quietly, rubbing his temples. "We did it." But Lewis couldn't shake the growing ache in his chest. All day long, Ray had carried burdens that weren't his to bear. Not for recognition, not for a bonus, simply because it needed to be done. When they finally rolled back into the depot at nearly 2 a.m., the lot was nearly empty. A few junior drivers slumped in their cars, waiting for rides. Ray parked the truck, stretched his stiff back, and gave Lewis a tired smile. "You did good today, rookie. Didn't think you'd last past noon." Lewis managed a small laugh. "Thanks, Ray. Can I ask you something? Why aren't you running this place? You're practically holding it together." Ray's smile faded, replaced by something deeper, resignation, maybe, or quiet acceptance. "Not my lane, kid. They've got their suits and spreadsheets. I've got my route." But that answer didn't sit right with Lewis. Not after what he'd seen. Later, after Ray disappeared into the night, Lewis lingered at the depot's small office. The glow of the computer screen illuminated the files he'd quietly pulled up. Employee records, promotion histories, performance reviews. Ray Donovan's name appeared over and over. Perfect attendance, pure commendations, client praise, letters from supervisors calling him irreplaceable. But beside each promotion listing, position given to external candidate, or opted for tech-focused leadership, Lewis leaned back in the chair, the air knocked out of him. 3 times. Passed over. Every single time. He scrolled further, finding an internal memo he hadn't known existed, corporate policy shifts prioritizing next-gen leadership and technology-forward candidates to modernize the company image. It read like a blueprint for sidelining the very people like Ray who had kept the company afloat for decades. Lewis closed the laptop, staring out at the dark lot where the trucks sat silent, engines cooling. The irony hit him hard. They were trying to build a future by forgetting the backbone of their past. Ray hadn't just saved a delivery that night. He'd saved them all again and again, invisible to the very people whose paychecks he protected. And suddenly, Lewis wasn't sure if the company he'd built was something he could still believe in. The eastern sky was starting to blush with the first hints of dawn when Lewis spotted Ray, sitting alone on the back bumper of his truck. His jacket was draped over his shoulders, a thermos of lukewarm coffee cradled in his hands. He stared out at the horizon, watching as the depot slowly came back to life, engines rumbling, forklifts beeping, the muted symphony of a new day rising. Lewis approached quietly, unsure how to begin. "I owe you the truth," Lewis said at last, his voice low. Ray didn't turn. "Figured you might." Lewis stepped closer, heart pounding. "I'm not a rookie driver, Ray. My name's Lewis Hendricks. I'm the CEO." For a long moment, the only sound was the clink of Ray's thermos as he set it down beside him. He let out a soft chuckle. Not bitter, not amused, just tired. "Thought so," Ray said, rubbing his face. "No rookie asks the questions you did, or stares at a broken route map like a man watching his house burn down." Lewis sat beside him. "I needed to see it with my own eyes. The reports, the numbers, they don't show what's really happening out here." Ray finally looked at him then, his gaze steady, his eyes rimmed with fatigue. "And now you've seen. So what now?" Lewis hesitated. "I saw a system that's failing the very people holding it up. I saw you, carrying weight no one else even noticed." Ray sighed, picking at a calloused thumb. "That's just how it goes, kid. Always has. You give your all, the company takes what it needs, and the wheel keeps turning. I stopped expecting anything more a long time ago." The resignation in his tone landed like a blow. Louis shook his head fiercely. It shouldn't just go like this. You shouldn't be invisible. Ray gave a faint smile, looking out at the trucks. Not invisible, just part of the machine. But Louis's chest burned with something more than guilt, resolve. Not anymore. Ray raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? Louis stood, determination setting his jaw. It means I'm done pretending the machine doesn't need fixing. By mid-morning, Louis was back at headquarters, standing before the executive board. He'd traded the dusty jacket and steel-toed boots for a sharp suit, but the exhaustion in his eyes matched Ray's. Let's get started, the chairman said curtly, flipping through his agenda. We've got quarterly projections too. I'm not here for projections. Louis cut in, his voice calm but ironclad. I'm here to talk about Ray Donovan. The room stilled. A few board members exchanged confused glances. Ray who? Someone muttered. Exactly. Louis stepped forward, laying a thick folder on the table. That's the problem. You don't know his name, but you should. Ray's the reason we didn't lose 3 major contracts this month. He's the reason our drivers trust this company enough to stay. And he's been passed over for promotion 3 times because our system values degrees and digital fluency over loyalty, leadership, and grit. One of the VPs leaned back, frowning. Louis, this isn't personal. We're building for the future. We need leaders who can navigate new technologies, not cling to the past. Louis's voice sharpened. He's not clinging to the past. He embodies the future we should want. A future where leadership isn't just metrics and dashboards. It's earned trust, lived experience, human connection. Silence stretched across the polished table. I'm making a change, Louis declared. Effective immediately, we're creating a new leadership initiative. We're elevating field leaders, people like Ray, into executive roles to bridge the gap between the office and the ground. No more gatekeeping promotions behind a glass wall of tech jargon. Real leaders, real experience, real voices at this table. The chairman narrowed his eyes. You're rewriting the chain of command. I'm rebuilding it. Louis corrected. Later that afternoon, back at the depot, Ray stood in front of his locker, staring at the new nameplate in his hands. Director of Field Operations, Ray Donovan. His old jacket hung nearby, grease-stained and familiar. But now, a crisp blazer with the company crest waited beside it, tags still attached. Louis approached from behind. Looks good on you. Ray turned, the weight of the moment dawning slowly across his face. I'm not a suit, Louis. Louis smiled. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to be you, but with a seat at the table. We need your voice. They need your voice. Ray's gaze drifted across the depot, the trucks rolling out, the young drivers waving, the hum of an engine starting, the smell of diesel and asphalt thick in the air. I'll do it, he said finally. But I'm still gonna wave to my guys on the docks every morning. Louis's grin widened. Wouldn't expect anything less. And as Ray stepped onto the balcony overlooking the depot, his new badge gleaming in the sunlight, he raised a hand in greeting. Same man, same mission, now finally seen. This story reminds us that true leadership doesn't always wear a suit. It's often found behind the wheel. What would you do if you discovered your company's greatest hero had been ignored for years? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and join us again here at Embrace the Journey for more powerful stories. See you in the next video.